was a problem! You all solve it! Check out the hook while my DJ revolves it! Ice, ice, baby! Boom, 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 boom. That's right, my friends! This week's episode of Stardust Crusaders is cool, because we are finally introduced to Dio's most trusted servant, Vanilla Ice. First things first, going into this week's episode, just know that the subtitled version of this episode decides to change the name of Vanilla Ice to Cool Ice, despite the fact that you can clearly hear Dio saying Vanilla Ice, and the fact that this guy is a clear reference to Vanilla Ice, the rapper himself. I don't know why they continue to change these names. It's probably a copyright issue, but it's kind of annoying, especially when you can hear the character saying it. Despite that, Vanilla Ice's introduction in this week's episode was beyond memorable. Not just for the fact that he just sort of randomly decapitates himself all for the love of Dio and his cause, but his actual stand is incredible. It's this blue, purple, and black demonic being which can literally swallow its entire body as well as its user and transport them to another dimension. He can transcend this world, and that's what makes this episode so interesting. That and the fact that Jotaro, Joseph, and Kakyoin are able to defeat Darby, and it was probably the weakest part of the episode, but it's still pretty entertaining, although I do feel that this whole Darby subplot could have probably been resolved in the previous episode, although I have to admit it was really cool to see how they actually won, because technically Jotaro was cheating, but if you don't get caught, it's not cheating. We also get to learn a little bit more about Darby's powers, how he can ask people yes and no questions and actually get the answers to these immediately, because he can actually see those answers outside of the bodies of people. So Jotaro is playing and he's saying that he's going to throw all these ridiculous pitches. While this is going on, Joseph is actually using his Hermit Purple and controlling the game with his purple vines. This way, Darby is not going to be able to know what type of pitch he's throwing, because Joseph is pretty much controlling the entire time, and Jotaro himself is not actually lying. He's saying what he's going to do and following through with this. And eventually, Darby admits defeat, ends up getting a lot of aura punches to the face, and is incapacitated. That's when it brings us to Vanilla Ice. Oh my god, this guy is so awesome. His design is really over the top and ridiculous in that way that can only be pulled off in a JoJo anime series. He kind of reminds me of the ancient vampires that we saw from the second season of the show. He goes to see Dio and he informs him that all of his men have been defeated, and this is when Dio lets him know that he only needs a little bit more blood to heal his body completely and to completely assimilate with Jonathan Joestar's body. This is when Vanilla Ice decides to offer his blood to Dio, and he does this in the most ridiculous fashions possible. He summons his stand, and he grabs this giant golden urn, places it in front of himself, and then has his stand decapitate him and fill the urn with his blood. The scene is really over the top and kind of funny and ironic, because Dio doesn't even really want his blood to begin with. In fact, he decides that he's actually going to get it from another location, but he does decide to bring Vanilla Ice back as an immortal vampire who now also has his stand, which can practically do just about anything. So what's really cool about his stand is just the way that it actually works. It literally devours its own arms and body and legs and even its stand user, and is able to transport itself to another dimension. And it can also use this in battle by grabbing other people and pulling them into their dimension. And that brings us to the second half of this week's episode, where Iggy, Abdul, and Polnareff have teamed up. They're going through Dio's mansion, dispelling all types of illusions, defeating stand users, including this one guy by the name of Billie Jean, who gets defeated in one single attack thanks to Iggy. But as they're making their way through the mansion, suddenly, on the wall is this written message that Abdul sees that's covered up by his hand. As he slowly starts to move his hand away from it, he says as soon as he turns around and looks, he is going to die. This scene is beyond intense because Iggy should be able to smell that something is wrong. Nobody else notices anything. His weird fire ability is not detecting any other stand users. And as soon as Abdul turns around, he immediately pushes Iggy and Polnareff out of the way as Vanilla Ice and his stand pull him into his dimension, and they stop just short of his arms, which completely sever and remove Abdul's arms. He even claims that Abdul is dead and has been completely disintegrated. What the hell? This is ridiculous. I cannot believe that they're going to kill off Abdul. They're going to do it in such a quick, over-the-top and extremely violent fashion. I really don't want to believe that he's been killed this easily. I imagine he's going to make some sort of return, but his arms are gone now. I really don't know what he's going to be capable of at this point, and the scene is just all the more disturbing because of how visually disturbed Polnareff is and the fact that Iggy can't even, like, breathe properly. Vanilla Ice is going to be one hell of an opponent, and I can't wait to see more of this guy in action. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of Stardust Crusaders? It was awesome. My favorite thing about it was most definitely Vanilla Ice. I love his design, I love his stand and the abilities behind it. It's really creepy and really disturbing looking, and I just love the visual detail of him actually, like, devouring his own arms and legs as he implodes on himself. Just something about that is absolutely ridiculous, and it's a really extreme ability because no one can even sense you if you're in a completely other dimension, and he can theoretically just sort of pop out from anywhere whenever he wants, and that's why he was able to take down Abdul so easily this week, and that was really surprising. I thought we were going to see maybe a little bit more from the character of Abdul, and even had a really cool technique this week where he summons these like multiple like weird fire candles which are floating in midair, which allows them to detect the power of stand users, and even at the end it still didn't work with Vanilla Ice, mostly because he was probably already in the other dimension and his fire abilities actually didn't have the chance to actually catch that he was there, but it was beyond intense. The second half of this week's episode was really good, super atmospheric, and just amazing, and a great introduction to the character of Vanilla Ice. The first half is just okay. Basically, it's just the defeat of Darby, and it's just sort of anticlimactic, especially with just Kakyoin coming back out of nowhere, and just the hilarity of the fact that Darby knew he was defeated. I especially love when Jotaro actually turned the tables on him, and he was asking Darby, am I going to hit you with my right or my left hand? And actually, he's going to end up hitting him with both, because aura, aura, aura. It's pretty freaking awesome. On the technical side of things, animation, artwork looked pretty clean and consistent and very stylistic as always, as is the case for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. This was just a very good episode with a fantastic introduction to one of Dio's most nasty goons. I really like this episode a lot, so I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Check it out, JoJo fans. Whether you've been watching the anime version or reading the manga version, you should definitely check out this episode. You'll probably see something you like. So I loved this episode a lot. I loved the introduction of Vanilla Ice, but what about you guys? Did you watch this week's episode of Stardust Crusaders? Please tell me what you thought about it in the comments section below. Do you think that Abdul is actually dead? Do you think he's going to be able to make some sort of big return? What do you think of the introduction of Vanilla Ice? And what do you want to see from the rest of the Stardust Crusaders anime series? Thank you guys for watching my review. Before you guys leave, make sure to thumbs up and like the video, share it with all your friends, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and follow us on social media. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby.